Welcome to Wizards and Warp Drives, the podcast where two grown-ass men get deeply nerdy about the things they love. My name is Nacho, and joining me this week is Fred from How to RPG.
Hi. So we're talking about one of your what is it? What would you call it? One of your loves, or is it hidden loves, or obvious loves, or this is a strange movie, Flash Gordon.
Guilty pleasure.
Guilty. That's the one. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about 1980 Flash Gordon, directed by Mike Hodges, with music composed by Queen, starring Sam Jones as Flash Gordon, Melody Anderson as Dale Arden, Max van Sydow as Ming the Merciless, Brian Blessed as Prince Volton, Timothy Dalton as Prince Baron, and Ornella Muti as Princess Aurora. A football player and his friends travel to the planet Mongo and find themselves fighting the tyranny of Ming the Merciless to save the Earth. So, what's your history with this film?
The comic strip and the old 1950s TV series. Okay. Because in New Zealand they couldn't afford. There's really TV One could not afford anything other than old stuff.
Yeah.
And so these sorts of things, even though they were made in the 50s and it's in the 70s, 20 years later, they're going through TV. It was like the Lone Ranger and everything else, right?
Yeah. I think 1966 Batman was on like for about 10 years.
Forever. Yeah, forever. Because it was so cheap. And it wasn't that great, but guilty pleasure too as well.
Has a connection to this film
comic
as well.
strip. I have only just recently watched one episode of the 1930s Buster Crabbe Flash Gordon. And I hate to say it, I think the first episode of the 1930s Buster Crabbe Flash Gordon is better than the 1950s TV series by a long shot. And probably also, considering it's not made in the 1930s, better than this movie.
We're going to have different opinions on this film.
Well, if you look, I went and watched it and I was like, holy shit, this is actually probably more exciting than the movie. And it's like, made it in the 1930s, really? And I was like, okay, all right. But yeah, so that's sort of my experience. I watched the movie with my family back in the day in the theatre. One, because my uncle Grant loved Flash Gordon. That was his thing and his generation, because he's older than I am. And also my brother and my grandmother came with me, and also my auntie. They all tagged along, and we watched this. And I remember Grant saying, "Well, I like some parts of the movie, but it doesn't really quite feel like Flash Gordon." And there's a lot of different reasons why that happened.
Yeah.
So that's my experience.
Yeah, it's. I watched this. Gosh, I was on holiday. We were in Picton, which is the beginning of the South Island. So I live in the North Island, and we went on a holiday down south. And I remember seeing this at a movie theater in Picton, and I thought it was better than Star Wars when I saw it. I thought, wow, this film. It is just a Technicolor rock opera. Yeah. I mean, I've got my. I'll wear my colours proud. Yeah. Great film. I think it's not a good film. It's entertaining film.
It's a good film in some ways and a really bad film in other ways. Yeah. But you can't say it wasn't a beautiful looking film, or that it wasn't colourful or exotic or had fantastic science fiction elements in a film or movie. And you certainly can't say that it wasn't erotic, because it definitely was.
It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
I forgot. I don't know
I
about the
forgot how
drugs.
horny. There's drugs because everyone's been like, he gives that Princess Aurora like, oh no, Dale. They give that stuff like, oh, what's this going to do? Will it make me forget? No, it'll just make the sex more pleasurable.
Oh, it's just one drug. It's not like I had. There's much more sex in this thing, and there's much more rock
Yeah,
and roll than there is drugs. So
that was something that stood out on this watch was how horny this film was like
yeah.
for a PG film, and it was insane. But yeah. So, should we? How do you want to do this? Should we go through the
Well,
plot?
you said introduction, so I had a couple of little things, not too many, that sort of talk about what I think Flash Gordon is and sort of how it sort of came about. Um, for example, that producer Dino, he
Yeah,
made some crazy decisions about this film, which I'm sure you're going to go into. Like
yeah.
literally, like decisions that rational people do not make.
No,
Um, and the way that he made those decisions often came down to flipping a coin or just liking somebody's face or just liking the
yeah,
way somebody did a movie. And so a producer, little bit odd, but the Dino at least understood that Flash Gordon was an action adventure, and that's the sort of film he wanted to make. And he had the right idea. We just didn't get that. That director, Mike Hodges, he'd made some small, semi-successful movies or successful movies with small budgets, but he was not the right person to direct this film. And he
yeah,
had a hell of a job ahead of it. Like a normal person who's a director would not have tried to make this film because it was totally unreasonable what was going
yeah.
on.
He made Get Carter, which is like a totally different. It's a gritty
Yeah.
English crime film. It's just nothing like this at all.
Well, I mean, also Get Carter. We're not talking about Get Carter, the modern Get Carter, like
No.
Sylvester Stallone, and we're talking about a much older Get Carter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the budget, it was started reasonably small, but it blew out to, I think the argument is it could have anywhere been as high as $35 to $40 million, which is more than Empire Strikes Back. That was made around that time-ish. It was a really expensive film, and it doesn't really look like it's an expensive film when you watch it. Like you can, some bad special effects in there.
Had a lot of matte paintings.
It did had a lot, and they kind of had to do that. That's quite normal, right? That's
Yeah.
not the problem with the film.
No, I loved
The
it. I
profit,
love the matte paintings.
the profit was only $46 million
Mm.
worldwide. A financial flop. You
Yeah.
have to make about whatever your budget is. You need to multiply that by 3 or 4 to actually start making profit. So they did not make a profit with this film. It was a financial flop. It did not work well. And Flash Gordon, like many things like Star Wars, Buck Rogers, and so forth, is heavily inspired or just stolen outright from Edgar Rice Burroughs'
Mm.
Barsoom or Mars book series.
Yeah.
But the problem is, Edgar Rice Burroughs always put a fairly stiff price on his product for good reason. So nobody ever made anything based on his books. This happens throughout history of 100 years or so. Nobody's ever really, until we get to John Carter. And then, of course, that didn't work out well either. Flash Gordon was trying to compete with Star Wars and with Buck Rogers, with Star Wars being the top biller, the most popular at that time, and Buck Rogers being more popular than Flash Gordon. So it's strange that this movie got made, but everybody was trying to find some sort of IP that they could turn into the next Star Wars, and this was what was going on here. So,
Yeah.
that's what I have to say in terms of an introduction. And I'm ready for your
Okay.
cast. So I'm really interested what the cast stuff is going to be about.
We'll go through the plot, I reckon. We'll go
Okay.
heavy into spoilers, and then if you want to stop anywhere during here and discuss any of these
Sure.
plot points,
Yep.
and then I think I've got about 15 facts that I pulled apart. I watched this film twice this week, so I had the Blu-ray which had the commentary with Brian Blessed. So I
Oh
watched the Brian
God.
Blessed commentary as well
Yeah.
and gained some more interesting facts through there. Yeah, I mean, I know we just watched Superman 3 and Superman 4, and this was such a fucking breath of fresh air. So
Which
it was just,
is really strange to be saying this.
yeah, this,
Yeah.
this was like, just the bar was drastically risen. So the film opens with a chaos on Earth where Ming the Merciless is bored with his reign and begins destroying Earth using a remote control. So, yeah, I liked how they had all the all the different types of natural disaster. Like the opening of this film is so cool. That noise, I had that as a ringtone on my phone for years. His ring noise, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, and then on Earth, we meet football star Flash Gordon and travel agent Dale Arden aboard a small plane. One thing that stood out straight away to me, did you notice who the guy at the airport was that was putting the luggage on the plane? Did you pick up on that?
Problematic. Isn't
No. Did
everybody?
you see who the luggage? He's credited as man at airport.
I
Did you
can't remember.
notice?
No, I didn't. I didn't notice. Can't remember.
It was Robert Coltrane. What?
Yeah.
And I paused it and I was like, is that Robert Coltrane? And I had to look it up on IMDb and I was like, holy fuck, that was one of his first roles. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool. Um, yeah. Yeah. So they take off in this plane. Flash keeps, and there's one thing I wanted to say. Why does Flash keep telling everyone his name while he's wearing a t-shirt with his name on it? Anyway, the plane is struck by hot hail because that's a thing in this film. And which does it vaporize the pilots? I watched this twice and I couldn't work out what happened to the
Well, because
pilots.
they never really explain it. They never really explain it. This is supposed to be exciting too. I think what happened is that Ming transported them out of there. I mean, but then again, he likes to disintegrate people or creatures,
Yeah,
so he could have just done it remotely and disintegrated the two pilots, and then had a bit of a cackle because he thought it was funny.
yeah. So the pilots just disappear. It's not really clear what happens. And then Flash manages to crash land the plane into Zargov's greenhouse. Um, who is? I really like this guy, this actor Zargov. I thought he was. Yeah, everyone in this film is, maybe apart from Sam Jones, is really just chewing the scenery and seem to be having a good time with this material.
Yeah,
So
the
yeah,
selection of actors is great. Yeah, Sam is not the best choice,
no,
but
we'll get there.
yeah.
Yeah, so Zargov is convinced that extraterrestrials are behind the disasters, and but he needs an extra. He's built a rocket ship to deal with this, but he needs an extra person to Is it basically just put their foot on the pedal? Is that the
Can I can I
accelerator?
can I can I just say something about this pedal?
Yeah,
Why does Zarkov build a ship that has a red pedal that he can't press down to stop the
yeah,
G-forces killing him while
yeah,
he's controlling the ship because he put it on the other side of where the controls are? It is
yeah.
not a well-designed ship. It's one of
No,
the things that when I first saw it as a kid, and I was quite young, I think 9, and I was like, I see problem with this, and I'm looking at my uncle Grant, and he said, "Just go with it, Fred. I don't understand either." And
yeah,
I was watching the Buster Krebs. I was watching the 1930s movie and the 1930s series and the 1950s series, and there's no red pedal. So somebody cooked up this nonsense.
yeah. There is definitely. When I get to my facts, I think there was like there wasn't a cohesion between the set designer and the director,
Mm,
which forced them to have to ad lib a lot of the film because
mm,
they were designing things that Hodges was like, "What? what am I meant to do with this?"
mhm.
So yeah, that might have been one of those moments in the film. Yeah, so the spacecraft requires two people to take off, and yeah, his lab assistant isn't up for it. He runs away, but luckily for him, Flash and Dale crash into his greenhouse, and yeah, he's got an extra person. I guess does he coerce them, or it's kind of almost
No, they're
kidnapping,
definitely
isn't it?
reluctant. They are kidnapped. Yeah, and I
Yeah,
like to
by
point
gunpoint.
out the original Flash Gordon was all up for it. He was not. You did not have to force him to do it. He was all for saving the world. He was not
Yeah.
worried about going in a spaceship.
Well,
This
he didn't
one,
want Flash. He didn't want Flash.
yeah, I know
He
he
got
wanted.
Dale in there, and then he tried to kick Flash out. But yeah,
No,
Flash is too fast for him.
no. In the older TV series, both of them were up for it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the trio then travel to Mongo, where they are quickly captured by Ming's forces. And I like so we're about 20 minutes in here, and this is when the film gets really weird. I paused the film and I googled how long does it take mushrooms to kick in, like if you eat magic mushrooms or LSD or any sort of hallucinogenic drug, and it says 20 minutes is usually like the indicator before that stuff kicks in. So I'm going to argue that this film gets deliberately weird at this point for this reason. I think this is not. I think this is by design because this film just suddenly just like even if you're not on drugs, you suddenly feel like you're tripping balls at some at this point of the film. Yeah, things get fucking weird.
Hmm.
So so they crash land on the planet Mongo. For some reason, I always thought it was Mars in my head.
No.
I I don't know why. I think I probably got this film. I reckon I got parts of this film and Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds mixed up because they're all kind of similar times.
Possibly, but the thing is, there's lots of different planets and worlds in Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Mongo just happens to be where Ming is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ming is immediately. This film just suddenly gets very horny very fast. um, so Ming is completely smitten with Dale, and then there's that weird scene where Flash he does a fight, but he turns the fight into a football game.
Uh,
And is it what are those things that they're throwing around? They look like watermelons, but they're not. And
they're supposed to be sort of eggs that are sort of an offering,
yeah,
and the story behind this is Sam Jones completely improvised this idea. They were supposed to have a fight
yeah,
between Flash Gordon and Ming's forces. Instead, the stupid football scene is depicted in Ming's audience chamber because Sam decided that the egg-like offerings looked like a football, and his character played football, so he should turn it into a football game. It was completely improvised.
yeah.
We've got the actress Melody becoming a cheerleader on the side,
Yeah.
and it just became really silly and goofy.
Oh,
And
sh-
it's this is the first time we actually start getting some action. Our
yeah,
first introduction to action in Flash Gordon is playing football in Ming's audience chamber.
yeah. And they're all like round the outside cheering.
Hmm.
Brian Blessed is like knocking people out on the back of the head without anyone looking. Um, it's and Queen kicks in. The Queen music kicks in. Yeah, I want to say I felt sorry for that actress. Like Dale is such, it's such a badly written female character.
It's a really badly written character.
Yeah, as soon as something goes wrong, her arms are around a male to protect her.
She's only got one really good scene.
Yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, her character is awful. But anyway,
yeah, yeah. I think Flash says it like something to her, and he goes at one point. He goes, "Save it for our kids," and she's like, "Oh yes, please." Like it's just immediately applies. He's going to pregnate her, and
mm,
she's like, she's down for it. So
mm,
anyway, um, yeah. So Flash is he orders Flash to be executed, um, which I think he does pretty much kill him, and that's a cool scene. They use gas to kill him, but Princess Aura. is infatuated with Flash. Well, she's friggin' infatuated with anyone. She's a nymphomaniac, this lady.
Mm-hmm.
She is, I want to say, though, this actress is stunning. She is gorgeous. And she secretly saves him from death. And say what you want about Ming. He puts on a good funeral. I mean, I hope I get a tombstone in a coffin like that. Jesus Christ, he didn't spare any expense.
No.
That thing is flash, man.
Mm.
Like, no pun intended. Sorry, but yeah, that's it. Like, he even gives us like his name on his tombstone, like this impressive font, this really cool
Mm-hmm.
font and everything. Yeah, so so she wakes him up with a. She tells him it's a kiss, but it's some sort of drug, I believe. She helps him. She immediately helps him to escape. They flee to Aboria, which is the kingdom of Prince Baron, who is Timothy. Is that Timothy Dalton?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. How has Timothy Dalton not been cast as Alfred in Batman? He is the perfect Alfred to me.
No, I think he would have made a better Batman.
Yeah, maybe in his day. He's very Errol Flynn here. This character feels very Robin Hood, Errol Flynn. Yeah. Yeah, and Zargoff is brainwashed by Cletus, who's the head of Ming's secret police. What did you think of this guy, Cletus? Is it Cletus? Is that how you say his name?
Clytus.
Yeah.
Cletus. I mean, either way, it's a pretty funny name.
He's kind of Doctor Doom, isn't he?
I like the character. But then again, all the villains are really appealing, and they're not portrayed as idiots. They're actually really smart and really dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did like that brainwash scene, how they go through his mind, and it goes all the way back to when he was in the womb. And they do that bit when he's like, they see Hitler, and like Ming's like, oh, this guy had potential. Did his wife drown? That was kind of just like glazed over there. Like his wife,
she did. Yeah, and the most
wife
comical.
fell in a swimming pool after being chased around by a bunch of people or something. Yeah. There's a lot going on with this film. There's so much to unpack. Dale escapes Ming's palace, reconnects with Zargoff, who are both captured by the Hawkmen and then taken to Sky City. Aura asked Prince Baron to protect Flash, but he's jealous because he's also in love with Aura. Well, Aura's like, she seems to be hitting it off with everyone.
Yeah.
Including her dad at one point. It almost feels like.
Yeah. It does venture into that realm.
And they enter this deadly game of What did you think of this? That game where they put their hands in the hole. That scared me as a kid.
It did scare me, and it's still impactful,
Mm.
but it's not enough, I think, to change the fact that Flash Gordon did a lot more action rather than being executed and a bit of football in an audience chamber, and prove that he's tough. It's not really the comic strip, and it's not really the older TV series. It was fine. It definitely has some tension to it, and it's not a hugely long scene, so I don't think it's a scene that they should have dropped. Not at all.
Feels like something out of Star Trek, that scene to me. It's something that you'd see in a Star Trek episode.
Most of this movie reminds me more of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
It really
what
does.
was I didn't understand the rules. Like, just don't put your hand in the same hole that the last guy. What you mean?
Well, no, there's no rules.
Yeah.
There's no rules. It's just a trial. Just, if you're a new tree man, right, you stick your arm in there once, and if you pull it back out without getting stung, then you get to live.
Yeah, because the poison drives you mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Aurora, she heads back home, but her dad tortures her in this kind of almost bondage type sort of scene.
Can I just say something about that scene?
Yeah.
The torture of Princess Aura by Clytus and Carla, who's also like the most vicious character The actress who portrays Carla is really impressive, even scarier in some respects than Ming and Clytus.
Yeah.
Under Ming's supervision, it's so ruthless, and she's enjoying herself so much, and she's quite serious about all of this, but it's mildly funny as well.
Yeah. It's
It really
erotic.
is.
It's like it's a cat of nine tails or something, isn't it? That she's
Yeah.
like getting whipped with, and it's and she seems to be quite enjoying like when she's getting hit. Those moans don't sound like moans of pain to me at all.
Well,
I'm just
I don't know about that, but I remember they had, if you watch the right cut, they show you the boar worm, which is
yes,
horrific.
yes,
If you get the actual scene with the boar worm in it, oh my God, you're like, that really had the version I have is that it's cut out, which is a
yeah,
shame, because it goes from the scene, which is kind of a bit sick and wildly funny, and then you get this, and it's quite horrific. And this movie is full of horrific. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
full of horrific. But yes, yeah, let's keep going.
yeah. Flash reunites with Dale, but he is forced to fight Baron in a death match. I liked this has got one of my favorite Brian Blessed lines where hand me the remote control. I want to quote that now when I'm looking for the remote at home. Where they kind of it's almost like American Gladiators or whatever before American Gladiators was a thing.
Well, this is what that one scene. We finally got to Flash Gordon.
Yeah,
This is what Flash Gordon's like in the comic strips and the old TV series. But the film is almost over. You know,
yeah.
the film is it's taken so long. And we got to that scene, and it's such a great scene. If we had more of that, I could see this movie actually being financially successful. But we needed to
This
have more.
film has pace though. Like it's not like once they get to Mongo, this film just takes off. I was not bored. I was engaged for every part. I think it's just because it's so visual. It's
Well, it's a visual explosion, so it's not like you're not getting stuff to process. But
hmm,
and this is why I mean, in the UK it did a lot better than in the States, and probably why is because in the UK they can accept that things aren't going to have quite so much action because they're used to the likes of Doctor Who, which is much more popular in the UK than in the States. They can deal with some of these older sci-fis that are a lot slower and a bit more cerebral. But this is an art film, so you've got
yeah.
the English can understand the Italian viewpoints as well to a certain degree, even though they might not speak the same language. So that's part of what's going on here, I think. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's definitely, it's not like it's you're not getting visual information, but I would say it's still not Flash Gordon until we get to the battle between Baron and Flash, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a great scene. And yeah, Flash wins the fight, but he spares Baron's life, earning his loyalty. So they teach. What was that? There was a lot. I wrote this down. I've got my notes are just like they look like the notes of a madman.
Mm.
That's what I forgot to mention that. Or when she takes Flash away, she calls it her secret pleasure moon.
Mm-hmm. She is a pleasure moon. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's get real. This film it's got over the top sexual tone to it,
yeah,
which is not the comic strip. I think it's product of the Italians being
yeah,
involved. I think it's very much product of this. The horniness of characters, like not just one, but so many. You know, even Dale and Flash seem to have a bit of a horn going on really quickly.
yeah.
And then sexual slaves, it's really quite amusing. And they both go both ways. It's not like just heterosexual. It doesn't matter who the heck it is.
No,
It's like anything will work as long as they get a chance to bone. You
yeah.
know?
It's pansexual. This place.
Yeah, very
Um,
much.
yeah. So yeah, together they kill Cletus, and basically Ming then offers Flash a job.
Yeah.
He gives him Earth. But he's still going to. Well, he's not going to destroy it. He's going to make it more easy to rule, I guess, is how he sells it to them, doesn't he?
Mhm.
Slavery, yeah. So, but Flash refuses. So Ming orders the destruction of Sky City and leaves Flash to die, conveniently forgetting that there's rocket cycles aboard the city. And Flash basically sparks a revolution because these guys never thought to team up. Like, maybe if we team up, we can take down Ming. That's never occurred to them.
Apparently not.
No.
Yeah.
So this is our great contribution that Earthlings teach these aliens. Hey, we can work together.
Yeah.
Friendship.
Well, it's because they didn't play enough football. If they'd
Yeah,
played football,
yes.
they would have known this. Now, look, the one of the things about this movie is the destruction of the Hawkman's palace, or Hawk person's palace, is
Yeah,
horrible. You can actually
yeah.
see the hanging wires like a B-grade movie as it finally kind of
Hey,
hangs off the wires at the end. You might miss it if you don't pay attention, but it's definitely there.
I think because I watched the restored version, 4K restored version, so they might have removed it because I didn't notice it.
Yeah, it's there. It's right just at the very end, and I'm like, oh my god, they blew it up, and then it's still hanging off the wires at the end, and I'm like,
Yeah,
that scene was just. I rewound and check it again. Oh shit, it's definitely there. But anyway,
yeah, yeah. So Flash rallies the Voltan and the Hawkman to attack Mingo City, and for me, this is when the film just. This is when the Queen soundtrack kicks in. Him and his rocket cycle. Yeah, the wedding. Yeah, This is. I felt my fists were pumping.
well, this is what the movie should have felt like most of the time.
Yeah.
Because if you watch the older Flash Gordon TV series, this is what Flash Gordon was like.
Mm.
I mean 1930s. I don't mean 1950s. My 1930s is action packed. The
Yeah.
comic strip was action packed, which is why it did so well. It's why Buck Rogers did so well, because Buck Rogers kicked butt, and so did Flash Gordon. I think I love that scene at the end with the Hawkman battling the ship Ajax. But to be fair, the battle scene between the ship Ajax and the Flying Hawkman looks really cheap and fake.
Mm.
And unexpectedly, fantastically cool, because let's get real. At the time when I was 9 years old, I'd never seen anything like this on the screen, even though
No.
it looked so terrible, even back in the day. And we'd dealt with Star Wars, which had done such a good job of making things look so good, you know?
Yeah.
And this was this was a different animal. It was so strange to experience this. But yeah,
It's epic. To me, I just read this. My
epic.
notes on this scene was, it's just, this is fucking epic. It's
Mhm.
all I wrote down, which
Yeah.
is what I was feeling.
As soon as they get onto the ship and they're fighting and blasting each other, and it's not just fly towards each other through clouds and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, it's like high octane action, and it's a lot of fun.
And that score, when that score kicks in as well, it's,
Mhm.
yeah. So Flash flies Ajax into Mingo City, braving the lightning field to breach the defenses. Ming and Dale's wedding is interrupted as Flash crashes Ajax into the palace, impaling Ming. He's really good at crashing ships into things.
He is.
It's kind of how it begins and how it ends.
Yeah. Did you know that there was actually supposed to be a fight scene between Ming and Sam Jones's Flash Gordon? And
He wouldn't be able
because
to.
no,
The costume.
there was a plan. There was a plan to do it. There was an intention to do this, and it was ditched. Like many scenes in this movie that got ditched, which I suspect were quite often action scenes, because the budget was just blowing out and it was getting out of control.
Yeah.
So this movie would have been much more Flash Gordon, Flash Gordon, Flash horny,
Flash corny.
Flash horny, Flash horny. No, Flash Gordon, like in terms of the comic strip and the old 1930s TV series. It's just their budget was just so far out of control at this point.
Yeah. So Ming refuses to surrender and seemingly disintegrates when his power ring fails. Baron and Aura take over as the rulers of Mongo. Voltan as their general, and Flash and Dale and Zorkov prepare to return to Earth, but they're uncertain how they're going to get back. And we get a sort of like a post-credit stinger. As Ming's ring is picked up, an evil laugh is heard, and the words "the end" with a question mark.
Because you know why? There were supposed to be 3 of these movies. There's supposed to be a series of 3 movies. They had intended to have a story that worked like this. And of course, the second movie never got made because the first movie was too expensive and was a disaster.
It was a flop. This was a flop. This became a cult classic a lot. Many years later.
And then look, I think one of the interesting things is at the end when he uses the ring, this is him transporting himself into the ring. So he's not dead. He's not going to die. He was supposed to come back. I think the actor had said that there was intentions for the character to come back. He had not died. He wasn't disintegrating himself. And the hand picking up the ring is supposed to be Clytus, who had died, but apparently not died permanently. So I don't know how that works, but we're dealing with a completely different idea of how fantasy and sci-fi works. But
we didn't really address Ming, but one of my notes is this Yellowface.
Oh, you're talking about the Asian fear factor and creating a character that looks very Asian because we're terrified of anybody who's Asian, and all Asians must be evil and bad. Yeah, there's an aspect to that. It's part of its. You've got to remember that Flash Gordon's quite old. It's been around a long time. So yeah, that's probably definitely a thing. But also too, you've got to understand that even though they took that motif in terms of Ming is Asian, like none of the other characters are Asian.
No,
Clytus is not Asian. Carla's not Asian. Princess Aura, who you think is going to be bad, she's not Asian. She isn't. So yeah, they've just taken bits and pieces, obviously, from different locations and put it in. I think what stands out for me with the plot and the events of the story is the horrific, dark, and ruthless disposal of characters, which is so shocking. You've got the lizard man getting disintegrated because he just happened to run through the hallway. You're getting the prince who can't provide a trophy to Ming being forced to fall on a sword because he's so loyal.
No, he tries to assassinate him.
Yeah, but he gets forced by Ming to fall on his sword. And then when he doesn't do it, he forces him with his ring to do it. Yeah, it's really ruthless. And then the execution of Flash.
That triggers Flash to play football with everyone.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. The execution of Flash, he doesn't imprison him. It's execution.
That's dark, that execution, I reckon.
It's very, very dark. I mean, all of it's so dark. There's so many dark elements. Clytus dying on the spikes is done in the most gory and horrible way. Eyeballs dripping out, and Baron dispatching one of his own young tree men because he's been stung by the thing in the tree. The tree creature. Yeah. Ming getting skewered
worst
by
birthday ever.
Yeah, definitely. Ming getting skewered by the ship's spike. And there's so much stuff in here that isn't light. It's actually really ruthless. And I think that's probably a product of the script, but also since there was so much improvisation going on and so many things that were changed, I think it's also because of Hodge. Because he did that more hardcore sort of stuff.
He's gritty. He was a gritty director.
Yeah, he's a gritty director. So even though it's bright and fluffy, there's some really hardcore stuff in here. The movie spends, in my opinion, way too much time showing off their locations, their special effects that aren't that good, and their costumes. And this is something that the audience, and myself included, I don't think could understand because we were used to going from science fiction, which was this is the approach you follow, and then we had Star Wars that didn't waste any time. It just got on with shit, and there was lots of action, and we didn't get that in this movie. And this is, I think, part of the problem because when you went to Star Wars first, and then this movie came after, and people were expecting a different animal, and they just didn't get that animal. They got an art film. There's definitely not enough action or conflict or fighting in the movie to build up tension, to be a fun ride. It's not like there isn't fun stuff in here. There's just
Mm.
not enough of that. Just give me the kick-ass stuff, because that's Flash Gordon. It's
Yeah.
mostly quite slow in terms of setting up the end of the film. We really only start going to full-blown mode once we get to the Hawkman's palace, and the fight between Baron and Flash occurs, in my opinion.
Mm.
But yeah,
All right. So you want some facts?
yeah, we're doing the facts stuff. Yeah, behind the
Yeah.
scenes facts. Go for it.
Okay. You probably know some of these, but
Yeah.
George Lucas almost directed Flash Gordon. Well, he wanted. So before creating Star Wars, George Lucas tried to acquire the rights to Flash Gordon, but was turned down. And this setback led him to create Star Wars instead.
Yeah.
So he was like, "Fuck it, I'm going to create my own Flash Gordon with blackjack and hookers." so yeah, I guess, in an alternate universe, we might not have got Star Wars. We could have got George Lucas's Flash Gordon instead. Iconic directors that were considered before Mike Hodges was Federico Fellini, who's a Italian director who actually wrote the Flash Gordon comic, and Sergio Leone, better known for the spaghetti westerns of Clint Eastwood's Fistful of Dollars or series. They were both, they were both considered, but they,
Yeah, it wasn't for them. I think Filoni, it wasn't strange enough for him, and Leone didn't see much point in it either for various reasons. He also had his spaghetti westerns going on and stuff like that. But Steven Spielberg had been suggested, but he was considered by the producers to be far too expensive to have on a project like this. So he was not. There was a lot of problems getting a director for this film.
Yeah.
It was a complete disaster finding somebody to direct the film.
Lorenzo Semple Jr. Was one of the main scriptwriters on this, and he was mostly known for 1966 Batman. He is probably the main contributor to the tone of this film, because this is really, shares a lot of DNA with 66 Batman and its campiness.
Yeah, and he was very much in that vein, but also too, a lot of his lines never got used. Like they improvised out so much of the script, it's not funny. So if you feel like you need to blame him for the movie because he was a script writer,
well, thank him.
The first version of the script was much worse. The producer said it was too campy. He did not want a campy Flash Gordon. He wanted the topic. The whole. Dion really wanted the movie to be a movie that took itself seriously, and this is why you'll see some things that don't quite match up. But actually, I appreciate that he made that happen. The problem is, I think the actors didn't know what else to do with this content, because most of them had no interaction with Flash Gordon outside of Brian. Brian was probably the only one who knew anything about Flash Gordon.
He had a love for it. Yeah, Kurt Russell turned down the role of Flash Gordon. He was initially top choice, but he wasn't interested. And apparently Arnold Schwarzenegger was considered as well, but was turned down due to his accent.
Yeah, well, I think Arnold would have taken the role, but it was the accent that they put them off, which is funny. And
Sam Jones was casted thanks to Dino's mother-in-law, who saw him on The Dating Game, which was like a game show. He never had acted before. He was a former semi-pro footballer and a Marine. Dino's mother-in-law thought he was hot. She saw him on a dating game show, and that's how he scored the role.
Yeah. It's like the horniness was starting before they even filmed, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Queen's iconic soundtrack was commissioned through Dino's team, but apparently Dino had never heard of the band before and was quoted to say, "Who are the Queens?"
Well, that seems like a reasonable question if you ask me. Do you know what I mean?
Uh,
That does seem like a reasonable question to be asking yourself.
yeah.
Um,
Uh, Before hiring Queen, the producers were considering Pink Floyd.
well, yes, because Dino really liked Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
He knew about Pink Floyd. I mean, the music score and the soundtrack were done by Queen and Howard Blake. Because they really couldn't get Pink Floyd to do it because they were on tour, I think, or something like that. And the original composer that was supposed to do the score completed
Mm,
about 60 seconds of the score, but got stinking drunk and was unable to complete it, but was still paid. So they'd already been paid the money, and so the budget's already blowing out, and you got no music score. I think poor Howard had to spend. He only had 10 days to do an entire score for the entire movie, which is why there are aspects of the film that have no score because it wasn't done.
yeah.
Literally, there's no score in certain parts of the film because he didn't have
I've
time.
been listening to that soundtrack this week just to get in the mood for this film. It rocks, man. It is such a good soundtrack.
Yeah, when it comes in, but there are
Yeah.
whole chunks of the movie where there's nothing.
Oh, I love it. It's epic. Yeah. But yeah, yeah, I did notice this. Like, but I think when it does kick in, like that's what makes that final battle so epic. Like, oh, now we're cooking with gas.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Can you
Um.
imagine if they score through the whole thing? It would have probably lifted it a bit more too.
Yeah. Yeah. I was surprised they didn't ask Brian May to come back and redo the missing parts, because it's really his. It's to me, it's really well. Yeah. No, I guess it's all of them, isn't it?
Hmm.
Not so much. It's not Freddie Mercury. That's like there's no, with the Highlander soundtrack. Freddie Mercury, the songs. Where this is more the musical elements to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely okay. Max Sydow's costume was apparently so heavy he couldn't sit down and he had to lie on a board between takes to rest. Um, Production designer Dalio, there was a lot of Italians on this set. Production designer Dalio, Danelio de Tonte's intricate sets and costumes were often created without consulting the director Mike Hodges, leading to some scenes having to be improvised on the fly.
Yeah,
So,
it's not a good sign when that happens. It's really weird. Like you've got designers of costumes that actually look really cheap, unfortunately.
I love the costume designs on this film. I love them.
They do look cheap, they really look cheap, but they cost a fortune to do due to this Italian designer. And he didn't just do that with the costumes. They weren't very practical. The wings on the Hawkmen were so heavy. The location sets were really lavish and bright and strange and weren't built to assist in the filming of the films. Like it made it really difficult to film, Arborea with trees because there's so many trees in the way.
Mm,
Um, Strange and unexpected, but not planned for, which is really bad. Like when you get a designer that pretty much gets to make whatever they feel like, and you
yeah.
just kind of have to deal with it. That's not a good sign. That's a sign of a problem. And this guy was expensive, and
Mm,
unfortunately, the producer Dino,
mm,
who has a name that's very very similar to the designer's name, which is
yeah.
Danelio. Um,
Yeah.
he loved him, so he could not do wrong, even
Yeah.
when, well, frankly, he should have been fucking fired. Uh, because he spent a lot of money on this film, and cost a lot of money because of the problems he created. So
Yeah.
if you want to beat up on anybody, the designer, you might love the designer, but he's also responsible for screwing things up pretty badly.
So yeah, he is the production designer from a film that I know you and me both love, Barbarella,
Yeah,
and
yeah, 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 yeah.
you can see that influence all over this film. Uh, Brian Blessed often made his own pew pew sound during action scenes,
Mm.
causing multiple takes to be ruined as the director had to stop filming.
And it's at the worst time because he's always he's making pew pew sounds and gun noises, and he's hanging off wires, and so is a whole bunch of other people beside him. And it's a
Yeah.
really expensive scene because it involves multiple people hanging off wires and flying and wing movements, and that's an expensive part of the film to put together. And he's ballsing it up because he's making little noises. It's quite entertaining to hear that, but not helpful.
No, it would have been frustrating for Hodges.
Hmm.
Yeah. Samuel J. Jones did most of his own stunts due to his tall stature. Finding a suitable stunt double for Jones was difficult, so he ended up doing most of his own stunts. He was involved in multiple on-set alterations, including one where he was hospitalized for a serious fatal injury.
Fatal? You mean facial injury?
Yeah, sorry, facial. Yeah, facial injury.
Yeah,
Shit, that's a bit different.
yeah.
Yeah, and he had to have most of his lines ad-libbed afterwards because of it.
Well, not so much ad-libbed, but dubbed because I believe he was listening to his representation. He really was not a good actor, and he was not famous. And unfortunately, he was a bit naive, I think the feedback was, and maybe a bit of a prima donna, and felt like he should be getting paid weekly rather, unlike other individuals. He had a contract to be paid at a certain period, which is quite normal. Like, that's how it works. Is you have a contract, you get paid at a certain period once you complete the job. And he did not complete the job, so he just decided that since he wasn't going to get paid this way, and because his representation wanted to take the producer to the bank and basically empty his bank for him, and really be kind of a cunt, frankly, Sam listened to them, unfortunately. And he regretted it. Years later, he actually said sorry to Dino about doing this. He didn't know any better. This killed his career. Like
Yeah,
that one thing. It wasn't just this movie, but the way that he performed. He wouldn't come back for reshoots. He wouldn't do the dub over. They had to get somebody else to do almost
to do
95%
any
of it.
promotion for it either. Eh?
No promotion. So he deserved to have his career fucked up. That was his fault for sure,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Gilbert Taylor, who was the cinematographer for Star Wars, was brought in to his expertise to use filters to create a hazy, dreamlike aesthetic.
Well, he did
So
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it's got the same. It's got the same DP as Star Wars.
yeah. That didn't save it.
Um,
No.
after you're talking about how shit it looked after Star Wars, Flash was supposed to have blue eyes, but Sam Jones couldn't wear contacts, so they abandoned the idea. And a fun fact that I learnt from the Blind Blessed commentary. Brian Bless claimed that Flash Gordon was a holiday favourite of Queen Elizabeth, with Queen reportedly asking Blessed to constantly deliver his iconic lines to her.
Mm. Well, I think the popularity of Flash Gordon in terms of cult is probably more in the UK than in the States. I think they could see it worth in it more than the Americans because it did not work well for the American audience. UK a little bit different, but then again, they know what the Italians are like. They're into Doctor Who and other things that are a little bit more campy and so forth, and a little bit cheaper on the production side. Although this movie is, as I said, not a cheap film to make, but made expensive for a lot of really silly reasons. Yeah. Did you have any other facts and information about the
No,
background?
I've just got some letters, but yeah, no. Have you got anything else?
Yeah, I do. So the spaceship designs I thought were hilarious, really primitive. They actually go right back to the original source material. They look like house cleaning product bottles, and they have literally, some of them were named off after products that were house cleaning products, like Ajax. There's one ship in the whole thing, and I'm not talking about the rocket cycle. That is awesome, and it rocks. And it's the insect ship that shows up in front of the Hawkman's floating palace. And then it has a little shuttle come down. But that insect-like front to the ship was just wonderful. And yet we had all these other designs that were really like bottles. that had things stuck on them.
I love
Um,
them.
yeah,
I thought they were cool. I still thought they were, yeah. We different there. We'll
we are
differ in our
different.
opinion there.
Yeah. The Flying Hawkman Palace looked awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
it still looks awesome today. Maybe the exploding part of it, not so great, but the certainly the depiction of that place externally and internally was wonderful. Um, the it's it's although the film had a script written by Lorenzo and it had storyboards, as we've said, it was heavily improvised. And a lot of the reason why they had to improvise it was the most ridiculous reasons, as we've pointed out.
Mm.
It's amazing that this movie even got made at all with all the chaos that was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Between the fact that your English and Italian crew, which is a mix, didn't even speak the same language, and then
Mm.
key individuals on the film did not communicate with each other because they didn't understand each other, either because they spoke Italian or had a really poor understanding of English, or they just wouldn't talk to each other, or they just walked off the set because they wouldn't finish filming. Like there's all sorts of just nutty things going on here. And of course, when you have that kind of craziness and all this improvising, everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon to try to extend their, I guess, their part and
Mm.
their usefulness in the movie. The events of the story actually made the film campy by accident,
Yeah.
generally.
Well, that's
Although,
what campy. I looked up what campy means. So campy is when you're meant to be going for a serious tone,
yeah,
but you don't hit it.
you don't get it, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think I would say that there's some stuff that's accidental, except for a couple of things that were definitely deliberate, and that is Sam Jones. Sam Jones, some of the lines he delivers, even some of the lines that Melody delivers, but Sam Jones's input into this film is not a guy who's actually good at making films. And Brian Blessed, very deliberate. And you can see Blind Blessed had a totally different view of what
Yeah.
Flash Gordon should be. Um, really
I
odd.
know. I know the lines aren't the best, but
No,
fuck me, this film is quotable. This film has got
it's
so
definite.
many great quotes in it.
Yeah,
Like, Flash, I love you, but we only have 14 hours to save the Earth.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's crazy stuff. I was wondering, are we talking about the actors here? Because there's a few things I'd like to say about these
yeah.
actors.
Get into it. Yeah.
Um, can I just say that Sam Jones's Flash Gordon is like it was written as a one-dimensional hero or character,
Hmm.
and on top of that, his poor acting is not a good combination,
He
unfortunately.
didn't come across intelligent at all.
No, he did not. And if you look at older versions of Flash Gordon in the comic book and in the TV series, Flash Gordon's actually got it all. He's like the astronaut who
Hmm.
can do anything. He got a Razzie Award for just how bad his acting was for that movie.
Yeah.
That's a feat, you know. That's a feat.
But looking back, I can't see someone else in that role now. That is his. That's his iconic role
Well,
to me.
it
Yeah.
is, it is,
Yeah.
it is. But I think the problem is that we can't see anybody else in that role because the character was written so badly that nobody who was a good actor would ever consider playing the role, which is what happened. Like,
Yeah.
there's nobody would play the role because it was not well written for Flash.
It had no nuance to it. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, you can. It's almost, I guess, because if you get the comparison that Lucas, essentially Star Wars is a rip-off of Flash Gordon in a lot of ways, and do you think Luke Skywalker is Lucas's equivalent?
a
Like
Flash
that's
Gordon.
yeah.
I think he's early Flash Gordon before he
Mm.
becomes Flash Gordon. I think that
Mm.
in the first movie, and then
Yeah.
he becomes Flash Gordon after. Yeah.
Yeah.
Melody Anderson is Dale Arden, the love
Mhm.
interest and reporter, has a few outstanding moments, but generally is just used as a sexual trophy. I found, but there's one scene where suddenly Melody, who seems to be having to be saved by Flash Gordon and anybody else, and at the mercy of Ming and anybody else that might want
Mm.
to have a fling with her or do something. Suddenly she's cartwheeling about and shooting red pig guards while making sure that her fancy shoes still stay with her. It's one
Yeah.
of the best scenes in the whole movie. And I remember seeing this and I was like, why isn't Flash doing shit like this? Like, what the hell? And then we get back to, so I was like, if you'd just give me more of that,
Because he's
just
not a
give me more of,
stuntman. They
you just,
couldn't find a stunt double for him, so he
yeah,
obviously wasn't
yeah.
able to physically do that stuff.
Give me more of Dale doing that, man. Dale was
Yeah.
rocking. I mean, it was only a short scene, but it was a great scene.
Yeah,
Um,
her character has not dated well. Like every
no,
time she got scared, her arms were around the nearest male next to
mm,
her. Yeah, and she was just she was she just sexually gave in to everyone that had on her,
yeah, and yeah, I really wish
including
this.
me.
This shows you how some people just don't understand how to write a woman in a character in a film.
And when they
And
have
this,
that girl fight, that's almost erotic as well. Like all the other women are watching it, and
yeah,
like that almost like felt like this film almost felt like it could turn into a porno at any second.
well, well, it did, didn't it? Later
Yeah,
on, after
yeah,
the film. So and then you got Muti,
yeah.
Ornella Muti, who played Princess
Mutia.
Aura, that hyperactive, horny goddess. Basically, she
Oh,
really is just like goddess to look at.
she
Um,
is gorgeous, man.
yeah,
she,
motivated, and she's motivated to help Flash just for a chance to keep him as a sexual conquest.
yeah.
It is difficult not to like this character, even though it is the most appalling character for a woman to have to contend with.
She at least she had some control. I know she was using her sexuality to
Yeah,
control everyone, but she was at least she just had every man in that film and woman almost like
yeah,
wrapped
yeah,
around her finger just because
mm,
of her sexual prowess.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
And her pet is called Fellini
yeah,
after one of the directors that, the key director that Dino, the producer, really wanted. They
yeah,
literally called her pet Fellini.
yeah.
That was so
Oh,
fun.
oh, she had that little midget, and I was like, "Is that an Oompa Loompa?" I was like, "It
Yeah,
looks like
yeah,
it
yeah, it
looked like
does.
the Oompa Loompa actor."
Yeah,
I was trying to search that up. She was tying. Remember she had that little like
yeah,
a little midget guy on a chain that she
yeah,
she was
yeah.
dragging around.
I think my favorite character is still Max von Sydow. Sydow.
How old is he? Has looked old forever, eh?
He has. But as Ming, oh man, he was so ruthless and so evil and so power hungry and so arrogant
Yeah,
and so horny.
just the way he pronounced Earth.
Yeah. And
Uh,
psychotic emperor. He's
he was
brilliant.
he was playing this character to me like he was in a like this was Shakespeare. This line, like he was delivering it like he was King Lear, or
Yeah.
he was he was in a Shakespearean type play. He was having the time of his life with
Yeah.
this dialogue.
That's the feedback from a lot of people, that he
Yeah,
really is one of his favorite roles,
yeah,
is playing Ming.
yeah,
And I'm not surprised. And he did
yeah.
such a great job. And you really do feel like Ming is a threat. He really is.
I didn't. Did you realize he was in The Force Awakens when we watched that recently?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I totally forgot he was in that.
He's in a lot
Yeah,
of movies that are
yeah.
really good. I remember seeing him as Ming in this movie, and I was like, I really hope I see more of Max.
Mm.
And we didn't get as much of Max as we really should have, I think.
He felt like he's just been an old man for his entire life.
Yeah.
Since The Exorcist, he was old.
But he
And
made a villain so well. He
yeah,
did it so well, and I really, it's a shame we never got more of it. Um, Topol
he
as
was good.
Hans Zarkov.
I
Topol,
think he was a good actor.
he is a good actor. As the genius scientist that's sort of erratic and wants to save the world. But the problem with Topol playing this character is he would switch back and forth from being serious to goofy. You just didn't know what to make of
Yeah,
this character, and I don't know. Maybe this is part of the problem was his acting, or the direction behind it. There's so many problems behind there. I would imagine it could easily have been anything between what was going on in the script, the improvising, the odd direction, you know, it's yeah. So this character's a bit of a mess, and
mm.
Topol is not a bad actor. So I wouldn't blame him completely. I just think that maybe he got mixed up, or it got messed up somehow.
I mean,
Yeah.
his introduction doesn't do him any favors of the film, and he just comes
No.
across as like, I'm a crazy guy. He's on TV. There's literally a news report on TV telling the world that he's crazy. And
Mm.
he's like, I'm not crazy. And then he's got a rocket. He didn't even build an exit for the rocket. They had to just go straight through the glass house to get out. Like,
Mhm.
you're immediately doing damage to your rocket ship straight away. Like, have an
Yeah.
exit, mate. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then he's just like, oh, yeah, no, come use my phone.
Yeah. Glass, yeah, the glass elevator, problem, right? For
Yeah.
Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Timothy Dalton as Baron, who is the hard, unforgiving leader that wants Ming dead but doesn't actually say it, and
Mm.
wants Aura as his wife. He plays it straight. I he's got to be one of the actors. I'm so surprised when I saw his character there, and he's playing this character.
Mm.
Is really, really just wonderful. It was such a relief to know that there was somebody who was taking so much of it seriously,
Mm.
because that it's a difference between him and then you've got Brian Blessed
Yeah.
as Voltron.
It's just a
Um,
prankster. Like, just,
yeah, he's basically the Hawkman leader is larger than life and
yeah.
often initiating really naughty and comical actions around the most ridiculous events,
Yeah.
whether it's around Flash or other characters. And it's really hard to
He's like
take.
Matt Berry before Matt Berry.
Yeah, it's really hard to take the movie seriously when he's going on and doing this. But even then, it's not like what he's doing feels like it was a problem. But you do feel like it was such a different his eye view of what was going on here was so different to what everybody else was doing. And
Mm.
it's really weird because, all the actors were told to play their characters with a serious tone generally. And I really appreciate that. Dino, the producer, was adamant you need to take the content of what you're doing here with the character seriously. That unfortunately did not follow through every single time. And so we do get that campy nature coming through, and just some ridiculous scenes that just made no sense. But yeah, that's my feedback on that. And yeah, I believe it is, as you mentioned, it's a cult classic, in my
Yeah.
opinion, because it's an art film, not an action film or a science fiction film. It's a classic because it's an art film with really bizarre sexual focus to it. And that's not Flash Gordon. And I think that's part of the reason why it did so well.
Mm.
And it's also like, Flash Gordon shouldn't have been made that way, but it
It's a
got made that way.
combination of its parts. It's a script by a guy that did 1966 Batman,
Yeah.
directed by a Englishman who was known for gritty crime dramas,
Yeah.
with the set designer of Barbarella. So when you
Yeah.
pull it apart, it
Yeah.
makes sense what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Because
This film, because of the way Flash Gordon was portrayed, actually resulted in a film called Flesh Gordon
yeah, I
that
remember
doubled
this.
down on the sexual side of things completely. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's me.
Um, yeah. I've got some final thoughts on it, but we'll go into letters. So I did ask, the 1980 Flash Gordon is a cult classic. Do you love it or hate it? And if it were remade today, who would you want to direct and star in the lead role? So I just thought that might be an interesting question. Got a few responses. So Neil Brand, I love it. It's a brilliant, tongue-in-cheek, fun movie. I'd like a remake to have a more serious tone. Dennis Villeneuve, is that how you pronounce his name?
Dunno.
Has a history in that department. So that's the dude that did Dune and the recent Blade Runner.
Mhm.
That's a totally
I
that
don't
would
think
be
he's
a
the right person. It's
that
not
would
the
be a
right person
totally
for.
totally different Flash Gordon.
Yeah, it's not the right person for Flash
Yeah,
Gordon.
yeah.
Flash Gordon is pulp action science fiction, and if you need an action director who understands that. Yeah.
Steve Little, love it. James Gunn directing some unknowns in the lead, please. I'm sure he'd be able to fit his normal trope in somewhere, as it's an ensemble as well.
Yeah, but
James Gunn would be good.
that's unfair because I think James Gunn can do anything. He's
Mm.
like Steven Spielberg. I think he's going to wind up proving that he can do anything.
Yep. I actually watched that Creature Commandos first couple of episodes, and I really enjoyed it. It was good fun. The first 2 episodes are out. John Shepherd, Eldon Elderich as Flash, crazy piece of casting, but Tom Cruise as Ming and Spielberg to direct. So Eldon Elderich, I believe, is the actor that went to did young Han Solo.
Yeah, no,
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 Tom Cruise as Ming.
no.
I think. Do you remember Tropic Thunder?
I do, but no,
Yeah, I'm thinking he'd come in like that.
no.
Jeff Snazzle. I grew up watching the old Flash Gordon serials as they were shown in the mornings on TV here, and was a massive Star Wars fan. So I already know that George Lucas' development, that when he couldn't get the rights to make Flash Gordon. So I'd really wanted to see this when it came out. Was really disappointed when I finally saw it a few years later, as it reassembled a camp as Christmas panto version of Star Wars. I know it's got a huge cult following, but it never really floated my boat. I'd love to see a more serious remake, and he's also chosen Dennis Villeneuve, would be a great choice.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work. I think the problem is I understand they want to go more serious rather than camp, but there are people who can do more serious without and not do camp without going artsy fartsy old style,
Mm.
slow as shit. And this is unfortunately what would wind up happening if he did it. It just
Who did you think? Who would you cast and have direct? Do you reckon?
I
I'll
think
put you
they're
on the
right.
spot.
I think that James Gunn could do it, and
Mm.
I have no doubt that Spielberg could direct this. As for getting an actor to play that character, I don't feel like I know enough about the actor pool right now. There are so many actors out there that I haven't seen, so I don't think I could nail that down. I don't know
It'd
if
have
you've
to
got
be kind of a young actor, wouldn't it?
it would.
Well,
I think it needs to be somebody who hasn't done anything before, but is really capable stage actor and can transition to film. Um, and so, I guess, in my opinion, when I was thinking about this and remaking it, Flash Gordon should be remade. Absolutely. I know there's a lot of people who think you should never remake it because it's perfect the way it is. I don't agree. I think the movie should be much more fast action because that is the character in the comic strip and in the very early TV series. And I do not mean the 50s, I mean literally the 1930s. You'd be surprised how much they squeeze into half an hour. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes on. It's even for a really black and white old TV series, it is actually quite exciting. And then to take that source material seriously rather than not take it seriously. I think that works better. And I think, this is the problem with comic books is people who never took the material seriously. And there are certain characters in the comic books that don't take themselves seriously or aren't serious, but this is one that definitely is. And then you need to still, of course, have light moments. That's great to include some light moments because you can't have just tension the whole way through. I think it needs to have a small budget, nothing that would try to compete with Star Wars because it will not work. You won't succeed. And yeah, I would like them to take the approach that Raiders of the Lost Ark did, which is small budget, high action, and low cost. And I think it would work. That would be my opinion. I honestly think because the horror factor of it worked so well, even going the route of bright and colourful and having more of a horror theme and an action theme to it would work really quite well. Yeah, that's
I
me.
know there was rumors that Taika Waititi wanted to remake it, but I think he pretty much did that with Thor Ragnarok and Love and Thunder.
Well,
That's
he's
pretty
supposed to be
much
doing a
his.
Star Wars movie. He's supposed to be doing a lot of
No,
things.
he got kicked off that, I believe. But yeah, and Chris Hemsworth, could have been a great Flash. I know. I'd like to see Edgar Wright. I think he'd be a good director, and I know he loves this film. He is the director of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And Flash, I really like. I think he's a great actor as Tarragon Edgerton, who was in The Kingsman, and Elton John.
Mm,
I think he's got a really charming presence, and he can do likable comedy. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it is a film that should it deserves to be remade.
yeah,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
given
Because
another shot.
it's a hot mess. It really is. It's amazing. It's amazing that the thing ever got produced and put out to theaters. Frankly, you would have thought that it would have collapsed, but they had to put something out, right? And it was a
Yeah,
very unfinished movie too. There were a lot of things that just never got filmed that should have been filmed. It would have probably changed the film a lot, and probably improved it too. Yeah, I too found it very disappointing when I saw the film when I watched it as a kid. But I feel lucky that it did get made at all, because nobody else has made Flash Gordon since.
yeah, um, yeah. Is it a great film? Probably not.
No.
Is it a fun film? Yep,
And
definitely.
in some parts it really is. It is a very
Yeah.
slow boiling film though. There's a lot of setup.
Uh,
But there's some scenes in there that are really, if we just had more of that, it
yeah.
would have probably worked really well.
So I love the over the top costumes and the iconic music. It kind of captures everything for me. That I'm going to say this, even though it came out in 1980, I'm going to say this is very much a 70s film more than an 80s film.
Oh,
And I think,
you could even push it further back than that,
yeah,
frankly. Yeah.
and I think it earns its place as a cult classic. And I think this film deserves the same status as something like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where they should have midnight screenings and fans dress up. That's
Well, I think Flash Gordon has more in common with the Rocky Horror Show than
yeah,
anything else, because that's the Rocky Horror Show is very horny and very sexual and very dark
yeah,
and very bright in
yeah,
terms of its color scheme. Like they're so similar. It's almost as if they've taken the Flash Gordon uh, comic strip and tried to duplicate the Rocky Horror Show, but with the Flash Gordon story. It's literally, it feels. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I rate this film. I really enjoyed watching it again. I think it's a good film. It still holds up. I was entertained so much that I watched it twice. So yeah, I'm big Flash fan here.
yeah. I can only do it once, and I
Yeah,
have rewatched the movie over time, but I always find myself like there are pieces of the movie that really appeal to me, and my greatest excitement is when we finally get to the scene where um, Clytus is killed after
yeah,
Flash and Baron are fighting it out on the palace and
mm,
the round disky thing. Because the movie from there is like, it's a ball. It really
yeah,
is. Even if it didn't feel like it looked that great, special effects wise, and it feels really fake when the Hawkmen are flying in. Um, it was a lot of fun. It really was. We just needed more of it.
mm,
And it could well have done really well if it had more of that. It's just, yeah, I think this is the problem with stories, is sometimes the setup doesn't build, 'cause the setup doesn't build the characters up.
yeah,
It doesn't do any of that. It just sets up the situation. And I was thinking, well, you need the time to set it up. And then I watched the Buster Krebs episode 1 of Flash Gordon, and they set it all up and they went straight into the action, and they did it in less than half an hour. And I was like, holy shit.
mm,
And I was like, wow. So it can be done.
yeah.
Yeah.
This just needed probably a more sort of concise direction,
Yeah.
or a producer that, yeah, it was all over the show. That was, yeah, as we pulled it apart, we can see why it is the film it is.
Hmm.
But it's what we got, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's very much a film of its time, and I think it's a fun film. It's yeah, you won't be bored watching Flash Gordon. Anyway, I think that's pretty much us. I don't have much else to say. I was thinking about next week and what popped up on my radar, and I haven't discussed this with you, so I'm not too sure. Um, it is the 40th anniversary of Gremlins coming out in New Zealand next week.
Oh, I think I got the Gremlins movie, so I can do that.
And it's possibly a Christmas film.
Oh, it takes place at Christmas.
Yeah. So,
I suppose
yeah.
I mean, this is the problem when you have an argument about, is it a Christmas film or is it not a Christmas film? And I
Yeah.
think it's a Christmas film if you're getting the spirit of Christmas portrayed in the film, rather than it just takes place at Christmas.
Yeah.
And my general feeling is that Gremlins is a Christmas film because the spirit of Christmas is actually in the film's story, rather than it just happens to take place at Christmas like Die
We'll get
Hard.
into it. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Happy to talk about Gremlins next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Remember to like and subscribe and all that stuff that I forget about. And cool. All right. And that's good night from me.
And good night from is it Flash Gordon?
Yeah.
Yeah. See you later.
Flash. What's the line? Gordon's alive.
Flash.